Those aren't matzo balls.
What?
Tim, do you think you should be making jokes like that?
Jerry Seinfeld, the king of observational humor and the mastermind behind A Show About Nothing, is now diving headfirst into some very big topics. In the wake of October 7th and the spotlight on antisemitism and the Israel-Palestine conflict, he's shedding his apolitical persona and embracing his Jewish identity like never before. A different Jerry, from nothing to something.
It's one of the greatest Jewish traditions. Why there's so many Jewish comedians and such a great tradition of comedy in the culture of Jewish people is, with all their crap that they had to live with, they used their incredible brains to make each other laugh. You do what you have to do and save a big part of your head to laugh, because that will get you through a lot of things.
Jerry Seinfeld was never supposed to be this guy. He rose to fame in the 1990s with a sitcom that became the template for apolitical television comedy. Seinfeld was beloved precisely because it stayed far away from anything divisive. No one tuned in for hot takes on geopolitics. They came for quips about soup and subway etiquette. Even in his stand-up, Seinfeld always kept the material light, centering on things like cereal and coffee. In a polarized age, he became a comforting presence, someone who made you laugh without demanding that you take a side. But that version of Seinfeld has slowly evolved, especially since the October 7th attacks in Israel. What began as a trickle of public commentary has swelled into something more pronounced. He's no longer just tweeting support for Jewish friends or reposting his wife's messages. He's traveling to Israel, meeting with hostage families, and giving interviews about Jewish identity and antisemitism. It's a notable shift, not just because of how quiet he has historically been, but because of how little his comedy has prepared the public for this version of him. To understand the evolution, it's worth looking at where he came from. Born in Brooklyn and raised on Long Island, Seinfeld grew up immersed in Jewish culture. He went to Hebrew school, had a bar mitzvah, and later spent time living on a kibbutz in Israel. But in his public life, these elements are background noise. Even when his sitcom dabbled in Jewish themes, like the bris or the yada yada, it was done with a wink, not as a statement of identity. For Seinfeld, Jewishness was texture, not declaration. That changed after October 7th, and especially after his visit to Tel Aviv. Suddenly, his Jewish identity wasn't just personal, it was political, whether he wanted it to be or not. Quote, "I'm Jewish," he said simply when asked why he had gone. But that simple statement, in the context of rising anti-Semitism and intense criticism of Israel, carried heavy weight. For many, it was a comfort, for others, a betrayal. Campus protests and celebrity targeting.
You know, I love that these young people, they're trying to get engaged with politics. We have to just correct their aim a little bit. You know, they don't seem to understand that as comedians, we really don't control anything.
Jerry has found himself at the center of a very different stage in recent months, one filled with protesters, accusations, and viral confrontations. While promoting his Pop-Tart comedy Unfrosted or attending public events, he increasingly encountered activists who viewed his support for Israel as complicity in injustice. What's striking is not just the anger directed at him, but how unfamiliar that attention feels for someone who once lived largely outside the political fray. Perhaps the most jarring moment came when an activist asked him for a selfie, only to hijack the moment with a Free Palestine message. Seinfeld didn't hesitate. "I don't care about Palestine," he replied bluntly before walking away. The moment, caught on camera and circulated online, drew immediate backlash. Critics saw it as a shocking dismissal of Palestinian suffering. Supporters, however, viewed it as an honest reaction for someone who felt ambushed and misrepresented. Other incidents followed. His commencement speech at Duke University was interrupted by student walkouts. In New Jersey and New York, his comedy shows were disrupted by pro-Palestinian hecklers. Protesters shouted "genocide supporter" and "Nazi scum" as he entered venues. Yet through it all, Seinfeld largely maintained his composure, even smiling and waving at demonstrators, which he later called "so silly and a little off target." To critics, Seinfeld's reactions only further emphasized a lack of empathy. They saw a man cocooned by wealth and fame, unwilling to engage meaningfully with a global crisis. But Seinfeld himself rejects that premise. He doesn't view himself as a policymaker or even as someone whose influence should stretch beyond laughs. His role, as he sees it, is cultural, not governmental. "We don't control anything," he said, reflecting a sentiment echoed by many comics who feel increasingly scrutinized in a world demanding political clarity. Jewish identity in the spotlight.
First time I went to Israel after I had finished the show, and I saw the way they reacted to me, and I realized this is not just normal interaction of celebrity-public interface. This is different.
How?
I meant something, which I never knew. And it gave me a wonderful feeling like, oh, I didn't realize what I was doing had another value that I didn't know about. And I, of course, loved it.
For years, Jerry Seinfeld avoided defining himself by religion or politics, but that avoidance has become harder to sustain, especially as American Jews face new waves of antisemitism and generational shifts in how Judaism and Israel are understood. When asked whether he thought about the Jewishness of his sitcom during its run, he said simply, never. That might be hard to believe now, given the current climate where Jewish identity is scrutinized more than ever. Seinfeld's relationship with Jewishness has always been a bit paradoxical. While he grew up in a Jewish household and took part in all the traditional rites of passage, he didn't foreground that identity in his career. It's only in recent years, and especially after October 7th, that he's begun speaking about it in public, reflecting not only on his own experience, but on how the world sees Jews today. His decision to visit Israel and meet with hostage families was a turning point. It made his personal ties to Jewish suffering and survival real, and for many in the Jewish community, it was an important gesture. But that gesture didn't exist in a vacuum. In a cultural moment where the Israeli government's actions are hotly contested, especially among younger, progressive Jews, any support for Israel becomes controversial. Seinfeld's stance is generational. As Leonard Sachs of Brandeis put it, Jews of Seinfeld's age see Israel as a haven, a necessary refuge. Younger Jews, particularly those who came of age under Netanyahu's leadership, see a very different picture, one tied to nationalism, occupation, and moral compromise. Seinfeld hasn't gone deep into those waters. He stopped short of commenting on Netanyahu, ceasefires, or peace prospects. His message instead is about survival, connection, and loyalty. Quote, "We believe in justice, freedom, and equality," he wrote on Instagram. "I will always stand with Israel and the Jewish people." And for many Jews feeling alienated or targeted in their own communities, that kind of public support from someone so iconic has real emotional weight. In Seinfeld, they see a figure who once stood for cultural neutrality, now stepping up for solidarity. Mob mentality and the comedian's dilemma.
I don't think Jews do well in an age of mobs. And I feel that right now in our culture, it's really easy to form mobs.
We're driven by agreement and consensus, and mob rule gives us comfort, gives us certainty.
Yeah.
It's all BS. It's all BS.
In his recent interview with Barry Weiss, Seinfeld returned often to one particular concern, mobs, not just in the political sense, but as a cultural force, an emotional, tribal energy that bypasses reason and nuance. For someone who has built his career on precise timing and subtle insight, the blunt force of mob rule is deeply troubling. And in today's online world, where outrage spreads faster than context, Seinfeld finds himself increasingly on the receiving end. He describes comedians as natural enemies of mob thinking. They are trained to observe, to critique, to slice through surface narratives. And yet now, those same comedians are often judged not by their insight, but by their stances. Did they say the right thing? Did they support the right cause? For Seinfeld, this is a loss, not just for comedy, but for honest thought. Quote, "You see through the surface of everything," he said of good comedians, and hopefully they laugh at it. But laughter has become complicated. What once served as a universal solvent now divides. Audiences no longer just react, they evaluate. And if a joke touches the wrong nerve, it becomes a litmus test. The comedian's burden in a political age.
If you're funny, genuinely funny, none of these things are difficult to overcome. If you're kind of funny, then you got problems. But that's what it comes down to. It's the funny. The funny is it. If you talk and we laugh, we're all good.
Despite all the controversy surrounding him, Seinfeld continues to return to the same foundational idea. Comedy matters, not as politics, not as activism, but at its own unique kind of truth. He believes that laughter is still the most honest reaction you can get from a human being, and that in itself is valuable. But he's not blind to how much harder it is now to get that laugh without stepping on someone's outrage. He talks about how the comedy world, like the NFL, is self-correcting. You either belong or you don't. The audience, he says, still gets the final vote. That has led Seinfeld to a strange cultural position. He's become a reluctant lightning rod, representing a set of values, tradition, Jewish solidarity, apolitical humor that some find outdated or offensive. Still, he carries on. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think Seinfeld's stance has helped or hurt his legacy as a comedian? Let us know in the comments section below.